While these grounding studies were positive, what was grounding actually doing inside the human body? The answer may surprise you.
Stephen Sinatra, who was a cardiologist from back east, was attending a convention, and we sat down with Stephen and told him the story of what I was doing. He said, well, if you're affecting pain, he says, you need to be researching inflammation. You don't have arthritis, you don't have cancer, you don't have all these health disorders. What you have is chronic inflammation. To me at the time, inflammation was you sprain an ankle and it balloons up and gets red and sore and it's inflamed. And he says, no, he says, inflammation is different than that.
We have so much inflammation in the body, and it comes out in illnesses. We go to a doctor with all these complaints, but a lot of it is silent inflammation, including my specialty, heart disease. Heart disease is an inflammatory process. So how do we reduce inflammation?
The most abundant protein in the body is collagen. It's the building block of our tissues. And we have gazillions of collagen molecules in our bodies. They are all embedded in a gel. This gel has a huge surface area, and it absorbs electrons and releases them when you have an injury.
Inflammation is produced by neutrophils, which is a white blood cell. You have an injury, you have a damaged cell. And so these white blood cells come over and they encapsulate the damaged cell and they release reactive oxygen species, which rip electrons from the damaged cell, and that destroys the damaged cell.
White blood cells release free radicals at the injury site. They chew up any pathogens, bacteria, or dead cells. They clear the area. It's called the repair field. It's the place that needs to be repaired. Without earthing, some of the free radicals that are released into the repair field leak into the surrounding tissue.
If there's not enough free electrons there to reduce the remaining radicals, they're going to steal an electron from a healthy cell and in the process damage it. Then the message goes out to the immune system and another neutrophil does the same thing, eliminates that cell, and then you end up with a chain reaction.
And this can create chronic inflammation, silent inflammation. You may not even know it's there, and it continues for years.
If inflammation is the cause of all these health disorders, then I know that not enough grounding is the cause of inflammation, because if the body is grounded, you can't have inflammation.
The initial grounding studies showed promise, but there was still a big question. Was grounding really achieving these results in the human body, or was it something else? A placebo effect of some kind?
I am Senior Research Medical Scientist at North American Science Associates. I spent about 10 years working in the environmental area, 5 of those at the Environmental Protection Agency. And in 1980, I started working at the Food and Drug Administration, where I led a team of biostatisticians, and we reviewed clinical trials for new medical devices. I would guess that approximately 10% of the medical devices that FDA sees from inception would end up getting approval at the end of the day. So I would review them very critically. A couple of years ago, my 92-year-old mother was suffering from peripheral artery disease, and that would require them to do an intervention. They would go in and have to clean out her femoral artery, put in a balloon or stent. They usually have to go in every 6 or 9 months to clean out the artery. And I felt at that age they couldn't keep doing this. I tried most everything, and I was looking around and I saw this thing on earthing, that earthing might be helpful for peripheral artery disease. And I said, well, it's not going to hurt her. I don't think it will really help her. So I purchased her an earthing sheet and had her sleep on it for one night. She was also having trouble hitting a forehand, and this is a lady who had played tennis for 70 years, and she just couldn't remember how to hit it. Next day, she had no trouble. So I said, there's definitely something here. In all my years in the medical device field, I had never seen any responses like this for any device or any drug. She's now 94. We play tennis 5 or 6 times a week. She leads a fully active life, cleans her house, does pretty much everything for herself. And we attribute this to the earthing.
It's done a great deal. I was having problems, well, with my legs. It was hard for me to walk, and I was quite certain I would never be able to play tennis and do other things that I wanted to do. And it improved greatly, and I went back to playing tennis. Not as good as before, but pretty good anyway. It just changed my life. I didn't have the worries that I had before that something bad might happen if I kept trying to do things. I should just go ahead and try everything.
This is the biggest development I've seen in the medical field in my 5 decades in public health and my 3 decades in the clinical trial field in medical devices. I just have a hard time believing this is a placebo effect.
You need electrons for energy. It's called the electron transport chain in mitochondria. It generates adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. It's the energy molecule in the body. I tell athletes that before an event, stand 15 minutes in your bare feet on the grass, and you will charge up your electron stores. And should you fall down, and athletes fall down, you will not have inflammation at all.
Now, Matt, what are we going to be doing today? You want to just give a little overview?
Well, you guys look a little pale
Yeah.
and maybe lack of energy. So we're going to try to get some natural earth energy here. If you could think about the last time you were barefoot, like in nature, it probably wasn't very recently, you know?
Can you walk us through it? What is let's Earth.
Yeah,
What is my
let's
first step?
take the shoes off. Take the shoes off. Here, let's roll up the pants a little bit just to get a better look,
Okay.
you know? So try to do it for about 15 minutes though.
Okay.
15 minutes a day.
Would you play barefoot? Ooh, good question.
Oh, that's tough.
3 and 2.
I first learned about grounding maybe 12, 13 years ago through one of the trainers for the Tour de France team from the US, and he was using it with many of their athletes and with surprising results. And I think this surprising best summarizes my response to it because it didn't seem to make sense. I think I became a believer once I started to explore the science. ATP is short for adenosine triphosphate. It's the energy currency of the cell. We're bioelectrical beings. That's the currency of our body. That's how it works. That's how we run our biological systems, is by generating this electrical energy that's transferred. And when we connect to the earth, a conductive surface in some way, there's a transfer of electrons that slowly go into our body.
We tried to figure out how much charge the body takes in when you touch the earth. What happens is the body saturates with electrons practically instantaneously. It's so fast that you can't measure it. So electrons from the earth enter the body right away, and they coat the red blood cells so that the cells repel each other. And then they can't clump, and the blood viscosity goes down. It's easier for the heart to pump the blood. The blood pressure goes down. All kinds of cardiovascular issues, they go away.
In situations where we are insulating ourselves from this surplus of electrons into our body, we're going to get the absolute opposite. So instead of having low levels of inflammation and a thin blood, we'll have thick blood that's more likely to clot, and our levels of inflammation tend to increase.
And I'm just thinking on the way here, I was thinking about how maybe The thinning of the blood is the reason that all the physiological systems go into balance.
Of all the grounding studies, the one that really got our attention is called Electric Grounding Improves Vagal Tone in Preterm Infants. In the study, 26 premature babies in an NICU were connected to grounding wires. The heart rates of the grounded infants stabilized, and their vagal tone, a critical measure of infant health, increased by 67% with grounding.
So there are two things. There are the electrons from the Earth, and there's the electrical rhythms of the Earth. And that's very important for setting our biological clocks.
You and Oprah have a great relationship. You've done stuff together for a while.
Well, a long time ago, I suggested to her that if she married me, she could be Oprah Chopra.
You're doing something with Oprah coming up. This is a energy of attraction, right? Is that what?
Yeah, the world is constantly, every situation, every event, every relationship is really a reflection of yourself.
Okay, I would like, if you agreed to it earlier, but
sure.
could you do a guided meditation with us?
2 minutes?
Sure.
So would you all put your feet firmly on the ground, keep your hands in your lap? Everything that we call the environment is actually our body. If everything wasn't as is in the solar system, the Earth wouldn't spin on its own axis and it wouldn't go around the sun. There would be no seasons. So your biological rhythms, circadian rhythms, are the Earth spinning on its own axis. Your seasonal rhythms is the Earth going around the sun, and they're programmed into your body. If you disconnect from your cosmic body, because that's what the Earth is, part of our cosmic body, you, in a sense, create the separation that results in disruption of your biological rhythms. Everything linked from dis-ease, discomfort, to inflammation starts with this disconnect, everything. Now we know that if somebody walks barefoot on grass or the earth or on the beach, at a very fundamental level, basically, the free radicals that are built up in your body as a result of stress and inflammation, they are neutralized. But what is really happening at a fundamental level is you're restoring your biological rhythms and bringing them in alignment, or you might say synchrony, with the Earth, which is connected to the entire cosmos. And slowly open your eyes.
That was so cool. Come on. I was trying to... Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I am so grateful for you.
The analogy would be a good orchestra. If they're all playing by themselves, what you hear is noise. But if there's a conductor, there's a kind of a coherence, entanglement of these frequencies, you hear music. So there's a cosmic symphony that is playing itself out in your body right this moment. Maybe you can't hear the tune, but you're dancing to it anyway.
If you take a microscope and you look at a piece of wood and you go down, 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 all of a sudden there's nothing there. There's molecules, but they're not even connected. What's holding them together? What's the force that's holding everything together? Electromagnetism. Our body is electrical. This is all electronic equipment. The heart, the lungs, the brain. I mean, this is electrical equipment. It's all electrical. Everything is electrical.
Can we measure the effects reproducibly? The answer to that is yes. We now have 20 studies.
There's 21 published studies in the medical literature on earthing and grounding. And this is peer-reviewed stuff. In simple terms, what earthing does is literally, it quenches the fires of inflammation. And if inflammation is the source of all root illnesses, including Alzheimer's disease, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, I mean, the list goes on and on. If you can impact inflammation and, squelch it, kill it, stop it, we're going to be healthier beings.
I didn't know anything about grounding. I had never heard of it at all, but I became a new mom, and I had my first child, and she had colic, and she cried and cried and cried. First thing I did, being a physician myself, was take her to the pediatrician, and remember distinctly leaving that pediatrician's office with a knot in my stomach, because the first thing they told me is, it's a baby, let him cry. Literally the only time I noticed that she wasn't in pain, and the only time I could soothe her, was when I was outside and I was barefoot and I had her in my arms. And every time we were outside, she relaxed. I noticed if I did use a stroller or if she was in a car, she was still in pain and uncomfortable. This is not placebo effect. Like, she had no idea if I was wearing shoes or not. She doesn't know that. I'm holding her either way. And I just slowly started realizing this child can only take a nap and feel comfort is if she was on my skin, held skin to skin, and I was barefoot. She'd be dead asleep, and if I stepped in the house and took both my feet off the ground, she would wake back up and the pain response would come back. And I didn't know what it was called, and I didn't at that time feel comfortable thinking about using it in my conventional medical practice, but I just knew that this is what I'm gonna do to help my child. I was working with a mentor of mine, and she recommended that I ground my energy. I didn't know what she meant by ground yourself. So the first thing I did was go home and look it up on the internet. And through doing a search about grounding, I found Clint Ober's work and the book about earthing. And I realized that it's a real thing and a real healing modality with tons of medical literature behind it. The light switch went on, and I thought, we're doing things completely backwards here. A typical day for a child is completely ungrounded. Most children wake up sleeping on a bed that was not grounded in a house or a building or on a floor that was insulated from the earth. And then they go immediately into a classroom that's insulated. And even on recess, in their recess period, they go outside and are literally fenced in and are paved with asphalt. And then they have after-school activities, which are either indoors or if they're outdoors, they are literally required to wear protective gear. And even if they're exercising for 2 hours after school, 100% disconnected from the earth. And then they go home and they go inside and they eat dinner and they do homework all hours of the night, and then they pass out in an ungrounded bed. So that's a 24-hour period of time completely ungrounded, and that goes on day after day after day.
I was at a retreat weekend for a group of women. It's called Inspire through our national association. It's for teachers who don't take care of themselves, teaching us how to. The first day I got there and our leader said, you need to go ground. And I'm like, okay. They grounded us. And within that half hour, there was no need for medication, and I had been taking 2 Motrin every 4 hours for almost 3 weeks. The district that I am in already actually has, with Clinton, a school that has a grounding classroom. One of the reasons that the other teacher pushed so hard to get this room, she had a group of students that had significant behavior issues, and they would rip their shoes off and go running out of the room, and they would all over campus looking for them. They would always find them in the planters by the trees.
But I had one teacher tell me in a special ed class that they had runners. And what a runner is a kid who just runs out of the classroom and they take off and everybody has to go find where the student is. I realized that these kids who are the runners, They're running out to the far back corner of the school campus, and it's the only place that has grass, and they're sitting down on the grass.
And so I went back and I talked to my special education director, and I said, can we try this? Can we try this with some of our students with autism? I brought it into my room, and I have a student with autism, very severe autism. He's completely nonverbal. And, you know, it's a good day when I can get this child to sit for 10 seconds. I pulled my mat out, I cleaned it off, and I took his socks and shoes off, put his little feet on it. That boy sat for 7 minutes straight and played with me. He sat for 7 minutes straight. So I took that back to my boss, and that is something that our school district is looking into, is getting more schools with classrooms that have grounding in them.
I've heard stories from teachers in classes where their students are grounded that they have half the level of referrals for discipline. Some students who were in tears because they were experiencing success when before they were experiencing failure with their behavior and discipline. I've heard stories from teachers with autistic children who have been grounded, where they have less of what they call the meltdowns. And the meltdowns are less frequent and shorter, and they come back into the classroom and they're learning more than they had learned prior to the grounding.
How much of it is that they're just so out of control in their mind, and there's so many things that they, and these kids, our campus is concrete. There's no place. Even when they're in PE, they've got tennis shoes on. There's no place for them to be grounded.
It's amazing what happens, not just with the teacher at the front of the class, but what can happen with the student sitting in the class. And just think if every single student and every single teacher and every single classroom and every single school across this whole world was grounded.
It turns out there's a reason kids love to put their feet on the ground. And these guys claim to know why.
Hey, my name is Finian.
I'm Lauren.
And my name is Ryland.
And we're Kiss the Grounds.
And our mission is to inspire participation in global regeneration, starting with soil.
We evolved very connected to the soil, with our feet in the soil, our hands in the soil. And what this means when you're connecting with it is just starting to be discovered. You know, there are papers and things in science that are just very recent coming out telling us that actually touching soil is helping to make your immune system stronger. You can feel it. When you're working in that regenerative relationship with nature, it feels different, it changes lives.
And one of the biggest sources of suffering in life is the experience of being disconnected. And disconnected from what? Nature. And the basis of nature is our soil.
The coolest thing about connecting to soil and the planet is it really makes you happy. It feels good. And now we have science that shows that it's a cure for depression.
So which one of you was the first ones to discover earthing?
I'm going to say it was Mary Alice. She was born before me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She got 18 months of bare feet on the ground before I even hit the
That
ground
might be
running.
an insult.
Yeah, we actually went to the track when we first got together. We went over to Pepperdine University. She hadn't run since when?
A long time.
Yeah. And I do yoga. And I was like, well, we need to go to the track. We went to the track and we ran barefoot in the grass for a couple of hours. She loved it. That was for fun.
That was for fun.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about grounding. It's just something that you do.
So we get up, we watch sunrises, and then we usually go out for a hike. I remember the first time he stopped and he took his shoes, he didn't say anything, he took his shoes off. Like, what are you doing? And he just started walking and didn't do anything. He also closed his eyes. That was a whole other terror. I came from a very dysfunctional home. You know, I loved my family tremendously, but there was a lot of mental illness. My grandfather being one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, he suffered tremendous mental health issues. And he also took his life in 1961, 3 months before I was born. I lost a great-grandfather, 2 great-grandfathers, another great-uncle, an uncle, a cousin, and my own sister took her life. This house was filled with people that were tremendously tortured. A lot of yelling, there was a lot of drinking, there was a lot of self-medication, there was a lot of craziness that was happening. To sort of survive was, for me, getting out in nature. Just anytime I could be outside. And I'd find myself lying on the grass or lying in a field or lying in a meadow. That would make me feel better. And then it wasn't until I met Bobby that I realized that what I was instinctually doing actually was a very real way to address all kinds of inflammation. Inflammation isn't just physical. There is neuroinflammation. That's brain inflammation. Brain inflammation causes depression, causes all kinds of serious problems. This is a much bigger thing than just walking barefoot on the ground. This is helping, well, especially me, helping me have a way more balanced life. My grandfather, you think of great artists, some of the greatest writing that they do comes from when they were at some beautiful and specific place, and their description of it, that comes from an understanding, from a connection to it. To know that there are solutions, and there's solutions in nature. And one of the biggest solutions is that connection to nature. And people forget that first. It's sad because it is so accessible and it is so real to know that a grounded me, Marielle, or a grounded you or anybody else is different than the one who's not connected. And that's what grounding does. It pulls you into you, to who you are.
You know, I think it's always the same thing. It's the thing that your mom said when you were a kid. Go outside and play. Go outside and get some fresh air. By the way, a lot of grounding from this guy. 19 years old. Look at the feet.
Yes.
That's one grounded dog right there.
I first heard about grounding, I want to say about 7 years ago. It immediately changed my mindset to appreciating the ground. And then the history that we used to all be on the ground and sleep on the ground and wear shoes that were connected to the ground, not plasticized and disconnecting. And I thought, okay, this makes actually so much sense. How have I not been able to put that together before? I mean, I've always loved nature. I grew up in nature. But the idea of actually putting my feet on the ground without shoes, it felt always good, but I didn't really connect that it actually could be good for my body. Because I know we're all electrical beings. So we're constantly being bombarded with everything sort of artificial and overstimulating. And I feel really sensitive to that. If I'm working, long hours and have this electrical mic strapped on, acting and just being around everything so electrical, it starts to just exhaust me. And I think we all get so overstimulated by all the electrification around us. And I don't think it's doing us any good.
Big girl.
Our bodies are constantly being bombarded by everything electrical in our lives. And for me, I've learned that in order to recalibrate my body, I just need to put my feet on the ground barefoot, and it just sort of equalizes. And I also think it's like when you get intentional with putting your feet on the ground, you immediately still yourself, and you're able to just, again, reconnect back to nature, to the simplicity of Mother Earth, of this great, huge planet, because you're appreciating what's under your feet. It's a whole symbiotic relationship that we've disconnected from in such big ways. I mean, that just the simple act of putting your feet on the ground can give you so much, and so much balance in your body and so much healing. It's like we're sucking the life energy through our feet, up our bodies, from our mama. So bad. I can't. That's really embarrassing. It's hard because it's so easy and it's so simple. People are like, really, you're making a big deal of that? Intuitively, it 100% resonates. And I'm raising my daughter this way, where I want her to be barefoot outside as much as she can. My husband likes being barefoot. That's great. I don't have to convince him to like take his shoes off. Animals always barefoot, and I know just bringing them outside makes them happy. So I'm just gonna keep doing that, whether people want to make fun of me or not. Whatever you believe in, when you're out in nature, it feels bigger than you, and it feels like you have reverence for what we have here.
I've always been climbing mountains, running rivers, always had a garden wherever I lived. Lived in Hawaii and Alaska, where I did naked gardening. It was wonderful. But once you're in a wheelchair, all of that kind of goes away. I'm 58. I was a singer, dancer, actress for most of my career. But then at age 36, I woke up paralyzed one day from this rare disease called transverse myelitis. It affects maybe 1 in about 2 million people. And when it first happened to me, they didn't know what it was. And eventually they've come to realize it has to do with inflammation, and it's an immune dysfunction, you know, your body attacking itself. At the same time, the doctors say, well, we don't understand it, and we don't really know how to treat it, so we'll just treat the symptoms. And for 21 years, that's been my story. My niece actually sent me a grounding kit about 3 years ago. She knew that I couldn't physically in touch with the earth anymore, and she heard about this, and she thought it'd be the perfect thing for me. So I received it, and my first impression was, okay, this makes no sense to me at all, but I don't want to hurt my niece's feelings, so I put it on the end of the bed and plugged it into the socket as per my instructions. And the first night, I couldn't feel anything. It didn't seem to make any difference. But when I woke up in the morning, my feet, which are always swollen, first time I tried it, there was no swelling in my feet. I could see the bones in my feet, and that hadn't happened probably in 6 months. I just made it a part of my life. After a couple years, it suddenly occurred to me, gee, everybody I know who's in a wheelchair has inflammation and swelling issues along with pain. So I called Marty and said, let me tell you about the Abilities Expo. Would you guys consider expanding your audience? He talked to Clint, thought it was a great idea, and now they're here.
Natural phenomena, a remarkable natural phenomena that exists right beneath our feet. Earthing or grounding is about connecting to this natural resource. And regardless of your condition, it can make you feel better.